Good morning, Lakeview. Good morning. Am I coming through? Okay, sorry. Hope everyone had a good week. I'm getting over a cold, so please forgive me if I start coughing in the midst of this. I'm also kind of going off very little sleep, so hopefully I'll be coherent. So we are continuing our study of Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, and we are covering chapters 21 through 25. So I've titled Mutlidimensional Warfare, because we're going to see different ways that warfare can be conducted. You know, actual physical warfare, spiritual warfare through prophets, and of course, subversive warfare through seducing your enemy to your culture. So I always like to start with a quote, and we're going to do an ancient inscription today. The misfortunes of the book of Balaam, son of Beor, divine seer was he. The gods came to him at night, and he beheld a vision in accordance with El's utterance. They said to Balaam, son of Beor, so will it be done with not surviving. No one has seen the likes, what you have heard. This is an Aramaic inscription found at Tel Der Allah, which is in Moab, circa 850 BC. So this is a couple hundred years after the events we're reading here. Balaam was a famous guy, right? This is the actual inscription. It's horribly damaged, so we don't really know what the rest of the story is about. It might be talking about the events of Numbers 21 through 24, or it might be a completely different story about Balaam. But it's just very interesting that we found this inscription. So let us begin with a prayer. Heavenly Father, thank you for this time to learn the lessons that the book of Numbers has to teach us, to let the lessons from the ancient past resonate in our hearts, Lord, so that we can learn from what we should do and what we shouldn't do, Lord. And just be with us as we go out into the world, Lord. In your name, amen. All right, so this is my bibliography. Again, my primary commentary is the one up there in bold. It's a really good one for the book of Numbers. Helps to make sense of some of the stuff. So, for the longest time, the Israelites were camping around here, but they've now since tried to move and are trying to start the conquest. And they went up to here to try to cross Edom, but the Edomites said, no, we're not going to let you do that. And Aaron dies, and that's where we left off, right? Aaron dead at the top of Mount Hor, and Eleazar as the new high priest. So we see that there's this line here. This is Arad. That's the first thing we're going to be talking about. Arad picks a fight with the Israelites. And then the Israelites have to detour around Edom, so they come all the way down here. And then they have to come all the way back up here. This is the King's Highway. It runs north-south through the Transjordan. That's what they wanted to cut through Edom, save themselves a big time. But the Edomites were, no, we don't care that you're our cousins, right? And so they're going to come up here to Jahaz, and they're going to get into more fighting with the Moabites. So Aaron and Miriam are dead, right? So this is the transition from the Exodus generation to the wilderness generation, right? The Exodus generation, none of them, except for Joshua and Caleb, get to enter the promised land. Not even Moses, right? Moses and Aaron both got disinherited last week. And now Aaron's dead. So while they're near Mount Hor at a place called Atharium, the king of Aram raids them and takes captives. Israel is very angry about this. And they ask the Lord, can we put them to the haram, the ban, devote them to destruction? This is the language God uses against the Canaanites or an invasion like at, Jericho, right? I want the entire city destroyed, everyone put to the sword, no spoils taken. When you put something to the haram, it is devoted to God, can only be used by God. So it either has to be given to the sanctuary or it has to be destroyed so it can't be used in the physical world. And that's what Israel has asked to do to Arad for what they just did to them. And God says, yes, you will be my agents of divine retribution. That's what Israel has asked here. And so they go up to Arad, which is probably modern day Tel Mahada. There's actually a different Arad. There's actually two Arads in the ancient world. And this is the southern one. So after their victory, Israel named the place Hormah. So 2 weeks ago, we talked about this battle that the Israelites attempted to invade Canaan on their own after the spies, and they were destroyed at a place they called Hormah, destruction. Well, now they're calling Arad Horma. They're retaking back their defeat from 40 years ago and applying it to their enemies because they're being faithful now. Right? They asked God permission to do this, and God gave them permission to do this. So, afterward, Israel marches south from Mount Hor to Eleph. This is near the Gulf of Aqaba. I showed you on the map just how far south they had to detour. And that's desert. That's terrible land, right? Edom will later control this land by the time of Solomon, but archaeologists suggest they don't control it during this time. So that's why they're not trespassing through Edom any longer. But it's a long detour, and the Israelites are like, why are we doing this? Right? We just defeated Arad. Why can't we just cut through Edom? And they grumble, right? It's scarce resources. They've been living in a fairly nice place. I mean, it's arid, but it's not desert. And God, he becomes angry with them, and he sends what are called fiery serpents to bite them. The text reads the Hasepharim Haf-Nekashim. So these may be supernatural beings and not serpents in the literal sense. In the ancient Near East, serpents are representative of divine agents, right? They're often depicted with wings. That's seraphim, right, are depicted this way. We see these on Israelite iconography, like the seal of King Hezekiah has a pair of seraphim flanking sort of a sun-like orb that represents God. So it's very possible these were God sent supernatural beings to punish them, or they might just be desert vipers. But again, this word nakash, right, it's the same word used as the serpent in Genesis 3, and that is definitely a divine being, right? That's Satan, as the New Testament tells us. So
was it a snake or was it not a snake?
it's a snake and not a snake at the same time. Okay. It's like the word nakash has a lot of subtlety to its meaning. It's snake. It's also liar. It's also one who divines. It's also something that's shiny like brass or bronze. And these are all kind of descriptive words that can be applied to a divine being, like they're shiny, like they glow, they're brazen, right? Like brass, right? So this is just, it's all sort of in this wordplay of this word nakash that's in Hebrew that we don't have in English, except for the idea that snakes are, duplicitous creatures, right? So Moses is told to make a fiery serpent and put it on a pole. This is the weirdest thing in the Bible, right? He's told to make an image of a snake and put it up on a pole, and everyone is supposed to look at it and then be healed. It's possibly winged, kind of like the caduceus symbol that you see on hospitals, right? The winged staff with the two snakes around it. It's this idea that superstitious belief in the ancient Near East, like if snakes can hurt you, having a snake amulet will protect you. This is what they believe. This is, I think, channeling that belief into God and saying, if you believe in God, follow his instructions here, and believe that God will heal you if you look at this snake, you'll be healed. Right? Not that the snake is magical, not that the snake is a deity, right? This is just like when they followed his instructions at Passover, right? Eat the meal this way, paint the blood on the lintel, right? Do all these things, and I will protect you from the destroyer. You won't lose your firstborn. It's the same idea here. And again, it was never meant to be worshipped. It was, right? 2 Kings 8:4, right? They had to destroy it because it was being worshipped, right? Instead of it just being like a prized relic from the past, this is what, Moses built to save us. Instead, we do what humans do. Here's interesting, though. We get to John 3:14 through 15, right? Just as Moses lifted up the snake in the wilderness, so must the Son of Man be lifted up, so that everyone who believes in him will have eternal life, right? Jesus on the cross is the snake on the pole. That's what John's telling us. And if you believe in the power of Jesus' death and resurrection, you'll be healed just like the Israelites who believed in God were healed from the snake bites. All right, that all track with everyone? Yeah. Well, after this little digression, we're given more of an itinerary of where they go from Aqaba as they travel north, and they're heading up to Edom, where they'll end up at Arnon on the border of Moab and Ammon. These are two nations. Of course, the Israelites were told not to attack, right? These are both Lot's descendants from his daughters. And Numbers also quotes several times from what's called the Book of the Wars of the Lord, these poems you'll see here in this section. There are 3 fragments of this book quoted in the Bible, and it appears to be a collection of victory songs celebrating God's work in saving Israel at this time. The full collection's been lost. Maybe some of them are preserved in the Psalter. I don't know, but this Book of the Wars of the Lord has been lost to history, sadly. So at this time, the Amorites controlled the Transjordan. That's everything on the east side of the Jordan. It's called the Transjordan. During this time, due to a conflict between Egypt and the Hittite Empire. For the last several hundred years, or for a lot longer than that, Egypt has basically controlled Canaan. But they've also been vying with the Hittite Empire that controls Turkey at this time, right? So there was a queen of the 18th dynasty. All right, just some background on why there's this power vacuum that's happening around this time. And this is either Nefertiti or more likely Ankh-Sunamun, who is Tutankhamun's widow. And she asked the Hittite king Suppiluliuma I to send one of his sons to be her husband because she's afraid, right? So she's asking for a Hittite prince to come be king of Egypt and marry her. Now, the guy did. He sent his son, a guy named Zanazana, that's a name, to be her husband. But the Egyptians didn't like this. They ambushed his party in Canaan and killed him, and this sparked a century-long war between Egypt and the Hittites that weakened both countries. And that power vacuum is what allowed the Philistines to have their success in invading Gaza, the Amorites to control the Transjordan, and Israelites benefited from it. There's a power vacuum in Canaan now that they are able to exploit for their conquest, right? We can see God's created this, right? He's weakened the 2 great powers at the time. Just as time for Israel to come in and take the land. So, just some fun history there. So here again is that map that I showed earlier. So they're coming up here, and they reach this place called Jahaz, and that's where they get attacked by the king of Sihon, who is an Amorite. And he picks a fight with them, and Israel goes on to conquer all this. This is Moab territory, but Moab was conquered by the king of Sihon, and that's why they're destroying Moab places, because they were attacked, right? They're not the aggressors here. And then after they clean up down here, they march all the way up here to pick a fight with Og of Bashan, right? That is quite a detour. That's the Sea of Galilee there. They're all the way up here fighting him. And then they're going to defeat him, come all the way back down here for the Balaam incident. So this is an extended military campaign that Israel is going to be occupying to defeat these Amorite kingdoms, right? So Israel asked permission from the king of Sihon to pass through, the Moabite land like they did with Edom, right? They want to use the king's highway. And he responds, of course, by attacking them at Jahaz. So Israel then sacks a bunch of Sihon's cities, like Heshbon and Dibon. These are listed because one's in the north and one's in the south. To say it's like a total conquest of it. They destroy an outpost at Jazer on the Ammon border, and they destroy a bunch of Camash's cultic sites. So they're annoying the patron deity of the Moabites. They're attacking the Moabite people here too, right? They're symbolically defeating the Moabites as they're defeating Sihon, their oppressors. Right? There is spiritual warfare going on here. It's not just fighting physical armies. All right. So, after spending some time securing Moab, Israel marches north towards Bashan, and Og, king of Bashan, marches south to attack them, and they fight at the city of Edrei, which is up there north in the plains of Bashan on the slopes of Mount Hermon. This is modern-day Golan Heights. If you ever hear news about Israel, this is the Golan Heights. It's a fertile plain, famed for its grazing, for its ox. You'll hear about the great bulls of Bashan. It's both a metaphor for the power that was ascribed to Baal, but also to the fact that there was great cattle here. So Bashan is thought to mean den of the serpents, and it's associated with an entrance to the underworld. Like they thought you could get into the underworld here at Bashan. And you know where Bashan is in first century AD, during Jesus' time? Caesarea Philippi. right? When Jesus is saying the gates of Hades will not prevail against my church, he is pointing out this grotto. It's at Caesarea Philippi, the foot of Mount Hermon, that was believed to be the entrance to Hades and Sheol. So he's literally standing at what everyone thought was the gates of Hades and saying, my church is going to conquer there, right? And you know what? That's what's happening here. God is attacking this power here, this Og of Bashan, but he's more than that, right? He's representing spiritual power because he's more than just a human, right? He's one of the last of the Rephaim, right? Joshua 12:4. Deuteronomy 3:11 says his bed of iron was 13 feet long and 6 feet wide. This is probably his coffin, right? But that's still a big dude to need a coffin that big, right? Rephaim are descendants of the Nephilim. We see this in number 13 in Deuteronomy 2. So he is sort of one of these people descended from those who, the sons of God and the daughters of men, cohabitated. So there's something supernatural about his origin. Interesting, in Ugaritic texts. Yes, Dan?
It says he's from the remainder of the Rephaim.
Yeah.
Not necessarily the very last one, because Goliath is still.
Yeah, you're right. Goliath is still in the future. You're right. That's me going over these on 3 hours of sleep. But yes, you're right. He's kind of representative of like the last of the rulership of the Rephaim, I should say. And there are remains of them that need to be hunted down and will be finished by David. David and his mighty men will finish this job of killing the giants, right? But he's the king of them, right? So this is from Ugaritic mythology. They believe there was this guy named Rapiu, who was the king of the Rapiuma, which is, in Hebrew, we'd say Rephaim. Those are the cognates of each other. They believe them to be deceased, deified kings who lived in Sheol, right? King Rapiu lived in Bashan and ruled 2 cities, Ashtaroth and Edrei. And Joshua 12:4 says, Og of Bashan ruled Ashtaroth and Edrei. So we're seeing a connection here between this idea of this giant king and this king that ruled like the spirits of the dead, who ruled from the underworld, right? And if you didn't know this, many times in the Old Testament when you see this word like shade or spirit, when they're talking about people who are in Sheol, it uses the word Rephaim. Yes, not some other word. It is referring to these giants, these dead giants, their spirits in hell, or Hades or Sheol, however we want to say it. So it's a very interesting thing, right? We don't see this in English because it gets smoothed out by the translation. A lot of Christians don't really like dealing with this, those who are kind of adverse to the more supernatural lens of the Old Testament. But that's what's in the text. So, like with Sion, right, God gives Israel victory over Og of Bashan. This prefigures the conquest to come in Joshua, where God will also give them victory. And also, ultimately, Christ's victory on the cross, where he destroys sin, evil, the powers of darkness, and death, right? God is at war with these powers. Did you know Psalm 68 is a retelling of Exodus to here in a more poetic form, talking about how God is fighting the enemies of Israel? Like, it's not really Israel doing any of this, it's God doing it for them, right? That's what Psalm 68 says. In it, God is at wars against the kings. These aren't human kings. These are spiritual entities that are behind the people standing opposed to God's people, right? These are like the prince of Persia and Daniel would be one of these kings. In verse 15, God wars against the powers of Bashan itself, Mount Hermon, right? O mountain of God, mountain of Bashan. O many-peaked mountain, mountain of Bashan. Why do you look with hatred? O many-peaked mountain, the mount that God desires for his abode, yes, where the Lord will dwell forever. Right, so he's talking about Mount Zion here. And he's like, why do you hate me? I am your creator, right? And we learn in Amos 9:2-3 that God will go where he needs to go to defeat his enemies, right? If they dig into Sheol, from there shall my hand take them. If they climb up to heaven, from there shall I bring them down, right? We think of like the evil spiritual forces, the demons are only down in hell, but they're not. They're capable of operating in heaven. They're capable of operating on the earth. They're capable of operating under the earth. and God will go where he needs to go to take them out. If they hide themselves on top of Mount Carmel, right? From there I will search them out and take them. And if they hide from my sight at the bottom of the sea, and the bottom of the sea is the grave, right? You see bottom of the sea in the Old Testament, think the grave. There I'll command the serpent, and it shall bite them, right? So serpents, supernatural beings, some serve God. Some are in rebellion against God. This is obviously a loyal one that's down there in Sheol that's going to work for God. And if we bring this back to Psalm 68, the Lord said, I will bring them back from Bashan. I will bring them back from the depths of the sea. He's talking about his enemies. He's going to take them prisoner and drag them out, right? That you, Israel, may strike your feet in their blood, that the tongues of your dogs may have their portion from the foe. God is saying, I am going to capture my enemies and give my people the spoils. Spiritual enemies, God is talking about here. And this is really interesting. We don't really have time to get in this. Ephesians 4 quotes Psalm 68, talking about Jesus going into the underworld and then giving us gifts of the Spirit. There is a weird connection here between this idea of God going into the grave to fight. And we really don't have time to get into this, but read Ephesians 4 with this idea in mind. So we have any questions about that? I know it's a really complicated and weird subject, and we don't really have time to discuss it in full. Huh?
That's a deep subject.
It is, right? The idea that God is going to fight spiritual powers wherever they're hiding, atop a mountain, in heaven, down in hell. He'll take them prisoner. He'll give the spoils to them. This is the victory feast in the end of Revelation, is this exact concept. All right. So, with Sihon and Bashan destroyed, Balak of Moab is able to reclaim leadership of his people. And he's afraid of the Israelites. They just destroyed 2 powerful Amorite nations, and they're sitting on his doorstep at Shittim, they're making the final preparations now to cross over the Jordan. And he's like, I can't beat these guys militarily. But they destroyed Chemosh's holy sites. And it wasn't great for us either. Yeah, they liberated us, but they didn't treat us nicely, did they? So he's like, let's get Balaam. He has this famous oracle up in Syria, in Mesopotamia. He gets oracles from God, they say, like Isaiah or Jeremiah. He's really good. His curses summon a deity's wrath on a person, or a group or city or place, right? His blessings always come true. They seem to think he has a unique connection to the divine. Like, he gets results. He also Balaam claims to serve Yahweh, although we'll see if that's actually true. But they're like, this is a superstar. He's going to, help us defeat the enemies a different way. We can't win them militarily. Let's defeat them spiritually. Let's turn their God against them. So they reach out to Balaam. They bring his payment. Now, he's not getting the money, but they're like, this is what we're going to pay you once you're successful. Right? It's a negotiation. Balaam's like, I have to consult God. Let's see what God wants. And he comes back the next morning. He's like, sorry, God said I can't go. And then the messengers come like, well, what if we give you more stuff? And Balaam's like, all right, got to go talk to God again. He comes back next morning. He's like, I'm good to go now, right? You're paying me more. It's a negotiation tactic to get more money. And he is going to go off with them. But then God is angry with him, in actuality, and he sends the angel of the Lord to oppose Balaam. We get this great story where his donkey is like going down the path, and the donkey stops as it sees the angel of the Lord standing in front of it. And the donkey's like, that's going to kill my master. It's a faithful, loyal donkey. And it stops. Balaam can't see the angel of the Lord. He's supposedly a prophet with a connection to the divine, and he can't see the divine standing in front of him. Right? There's an irony here. The entire Balaam saga is full of irony. So he gets angry. He starts beating his loyal donkey, who is protecting him. This makes the angel of the Lord even madder. And so God sort of speaks through the donkey, or perhaps allow the donkey to, speak its mind. And the donkey's like, what are you doing? I'm faithful. I'm trying to save you. And Balaam doesn't understand it. But then he's permitted to see. God allows him to see. And he realizes, hey, his donkey was saving him. He repents. He promises obedience to the angel of the Lord. This is important because he's not going to be able to lie about what the prophecies are saying coming up. But again, what sort of true prophet couldn't see the angel of the Lord? Right? Are we saying this? Is the text suggesting he's actually a false prophet? And suddenly he's about to become the real deal? Is this the sin that made God angry, that you're going to speak in my name, but you're really not? Right? I'm going to make sure you actually speak in my name now? Yes, Dan?
The transition from God telling him not to go to God telling him, okay, you can go. I think it's important for us to get our heads around so that we understand the nature of God. He's not actually changing his mind.
No.
He's responding to the development of Balak's character. Suppose Balak had taken a stronger desire to go, the next right thing for Balak is to be humiliated. And so I hear God's voice saying, okay, you can go. He's putting in a tone that says, all right, I warned you the first time. Now you're going to learn a little harder.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. This is exactly like Moses after the burning bush, where God's like, go to Egypt. And then suddenly God's angry and wants to kill Moses because Moses has a problem he needs to address, which apparently is he didn't circumcise his kids, maybe, or himself. He's not upholding the covenant, is what that means. Here, it's probably that Balaam is kind of a shady guy. Both are saved by a woman, right? Zipporah, the she-donkey. So it's just an interesting parallel there. So it's a fun little thing. So Balaam is kind of like a Moses here. And he kind of wants to do his thing, but God's going to make sure he does what God wants. So Balaam finally arrives, and we get this series of 3 sites, right, where he delivers oracles, and there each are peaks that overlook Shittim, and each one gets progressively closer to it if you go there in real life. And you'll notice that, like, at the first peak, you can kind of sort of see a little bit of the camp because they're so big. You can only see a little portion of it, right? They're so numerous. God is blessing them. Then he goes to the next one. You can see more. Finally, at the third site, you can see them all as they're right over it. But the first place is called Kiriath Huzoth, and Balak, following Balaam's orders, offers impressive sacrifices on 7 altars. 7. He does 7 ox, 7 ram. This is expensive. He's like, I'm bribing God with good food offerings. You're going to do what I want, right, God? Balaam expects these to work, but these are not worthy offerings to God. God doesn't care about your sacrifices if your heart's not in the right place.
He already owns the cattle anyway.
That's right. You're not really sacrificing any. Well, you're sacrificing because you're denying yourself, but God already owns it all, right? So the next morning, standing in the high place, Balaam can only see a portion of his people, right? We talked about that. And he attempts to curse Israel, but he cannot compel God, right? This is the creator of the universe. This is the supreme being. There's none higher. Yeah, there are gods, but they're all created by Yahweh, right? Instead of cursing them, he has to speak the words of God, right? He has to speak the blessing. That's the irony here. He came here to curse them, and instead he blesses Israel. And imagine Balak, you're like, what are you doing? I'm paying you all this money. I sacrificed a bunch of animals. Why are you blessing these people? Right? And there's a beautiful poetry, and I really wish we could dig into all the symbolism, but we don't have time. So the first time was a failure, so they moved to Pisgah. Balaam seems to think this is a sacred site to God. Mount Nebo, where Moses died, is part of this range, so this might actually be Mount Nebo, where they're standing on, or it's close by. So Balaam might recognize this mountain as a sacred place. Anyways, it's got a good vantage point. So once more, they make the sacrifices. God will not be manipulated by divination or sacrifices. He's not going to curse Israel, right? He loves Israel. Israel is his chosen people, right? So God once again places the blessing in Balaam's mouth. In the first oracle, right, Balaam said a nation has come out of Egypt. And now he adds that God carried that nation out of Egypt, right? So he's giving credit to God. God is described as having horns of a wild bull. This is usurping pagan imagery that El and Baal and like the Apis bull of Egypt use. So this is the greatness of God is at work. That's what we're getting here, right? Through Balaam blessing the people instead of cursing them, but just the entire Exodus story. Everything is all about the greatness of God here. And so Balak is very exasperated now. He sacrificed 14 bulls, 14 rams. This is costing him money. And he commands Balaam to stop blessing them, right? Balaam, though, he says, I got to speak what Yahweh tells me to speak. Balaam is smart enough not to do the opposite of that, right? You know, Balaam saw the angel of the Lord. He swore he would obey the angel of the Lord. He recognized he was standing, before his death, right? So this time they go to a sacred cultic site to Baal, right? Baal Peor, right? And here they make their third and final attempt. Balak is hoping Yahweh is a fickle God, like his God is. Like all the pagan gods are fickle. Like one moment you'll have their blessing and the next moment you won't, right? You can entice them with gifts. They need you to feed them, right? The gods are lazy. They don't want to get their own supper. They want you to provide it. You look at Mesopotamian creation mythology. Humans were created so the gods could just sit around and relax and let the humans do all the hard work. That's how they saw their gods. This is not Yahweh. So, 7 altars raised, 7 rams and bulls sacrificed. Is this becoming comical, right? This futility here. The author of Numbers is like, this is ridiculous. They think it's going to work a third time. Balaam is like, I can't even curse Israel. So he tries a different plan. He tries to find an omen, right? To see if God has turned his favor on Israel. So he's looking for an omen, maybe in the sky. Maybe he's opening up an entrail of a bird. Maybe he's looking at some tea leaves at the bottom of a cup. That's what seers are supposed to do. He gets no omen, though, because God's not going to give him one. And here's something interesting. The other 2 times, Balaam goes apart to receive his oracle, and then comes back and reports it. This time, God's Spirit comes down on Balaam, and he delivers a third oracle of blessing. And these words honor Jacob, Israel's beauty, fertility, military power, and honors God as Israel's redeemer. We'll see echoes of Eden in this third one, in the lush orchards and gushing rivers. This blessing is also a warning to Balak. Oppose Israel, and you oppose God to your detriment. If you bless Israel, though, God will honor you, God will bless you. Balak flies into a rage. He has now sacrificed 21 bulls and 21 rams, wasted 3 days, and he's gotten nothing. All he's gotten is his enemies are going to grow stronger. Right? He believes this oracle. Right? That's, he absolutely believes it. And he is angry. He's probably yelling. He's probably screaming at Balaam. And a fourth oracle pops out of Balaam's mouth. And this one is a curse. It's the curse Balak wanted, but not against who Balak wanted it to be applied. It's a curse against Moab. It's a curse against the Midianites that are conspiring with the Moabites right now. Right? It's saying that they're going to be destroyed by the star scepter of Israel, which is a very weird metaphor there. So, and the Amalekites, the Amalekites are getting thrown into because their time's coming. And the Kenites, those are Midianites. And this is all to say that God is not a local deity. He is sovereign over Israel and non-Israel nations. Right? So mess with him at your own detriment. And Balak must be feeling pretty depressed. He just got cursed. So the star and scepter, it's a very interesting metaphor. This is very common outside of the Bible, right? All over the ancient Near East, star and scepter are symbols of the king. God doesn't like to use this symbol normally for kings of Israel because stars are worshipped. That's like giving a deific quality to your king by saying he's a star. But God is speaking to a pagan king through a pagan prophet. So he's using pagan language here, which is why we see the star scepter metaphor. but normally you won't see kings of Israel being called stars. Because God, as God says, they're just little lights in the sky. They're not beings to be worshipped. So again, the Kenites are Midianite tribes. Some have joined the Israelites following Moses' father-in-law, but apparently some of them are working against them. Maybe there's a cohort that spent the last 40 years in the desert going, wow, why did we do this? Why did we stick with your son-in-law, Hobath? And they're not happy. But they're all in for a punishment. And that punishment's going to come from a group called the Kittim. And the Kittim is an ancient name for Cyprus. So these are Greeks. This is probably the sea people, or as the Bible calls them, the Philistines. And they're about to invade Canaan, or it's kind of happening, depending on where you think the conquest happens. But they are about to take over Gaza in the near future, and they are going to become a military power that Israel is going to butt heads against, but also is going to cause problems for everyone else. So God is bringing in the Philistines to work some punishment against his people. That's how God does. He uses other nations often to punish a wicked nation. And then those nations, of course, do wicked things, and God has to punish them, and humans don't learn. That's kind of the problem. And then this is how it ends. Then Balaam got up and returned to his home, and Balak also went on his own way. You can just see them very defeated. Balaam didn't get paid, probably, because he didn't curse Israel. So, not a good day for Balaam and Balak. That brings us to the last chapter that we're going to cover. The third way that Israel's enemies attack them. Military might failed. Getting a prophet to curse them failed. Now they're going to use sex and idolatry. And this one works. That's the sad part. So the Moabite women start prostituting themselves to the Israelite men and leading them to worship Baal of Peor. So they're really about to commit the worst sin against God. They're going to be unfaithful to him. After all this, right there on the edge of the promised land. Some of their chieftains, even some of the leaders of Israel, are participating in this. And Yahweh and Moses are angry, really angry. The leaders of Israel are ordered executed by impaling. Hung on a tree is the euphemism. Their bodies are displayed before the tabernacle as a warning. Their leaders have failed to stop the spiritual adultery, right? And then the judges are ordered to kill all the men who worship Baal, right? Remember, to be hung on a tree is to be cursed, according to Deuteronomy. This is what Deuteronomy is talking about, being displayed this way as an object lesson for your crimes. That's what crucifixion is. Crucifixion is an object lesson for your crimes. Same thing here. So worshiping false gods is, of course, one of the three major categories of sins that stain the land. And it's also mixed with sexual immorality here. So we're getting double problems. So there's a culling, and the community is grieving their dead. Right? And then this bright young man, he marries the daughter of the Midianite chieftain and brings her home to his family in the midst of all this, seen brazenly, like just walking openly with her, so much that Phinehas just notices them. Right? Phinehas is the grandson of Aaron. He's going to be the third high priest. This is not just him bringing his new wife home and Phinehas not liking interracial marriage. This is a priestess. They're going to be conducting a sexual fertility rite. They're going to be worshiping Baal, basically in the middle of the camp. That's what's happening here. I don't know why this young man seems to think he'll get away with it. Maybe because she's the chieftain's daughter. Maybe, I don't know. But in his arrogance, he thinks nothing bad will happen. Instead of a fertility blessing, God sends a plague, right? Death. And this is where Phinehas walks in, right in the middle of the ritual. He is jealous for God. He takes a spear and he kills the young couple in the middle of their act. He defends God jealously with the same jealousy that God feels for his people, right? Phinehas loves God, and Dan has a question, yes?
So I'm reading through here, I'm not seeing where this gal was a
It's at the end. They list her pedigree at the very end of it.
Okay.
Yeah. Don't ask me why they did it that way.
Okay.
Yeah, that's just, they sometimes put important information at the end of the story, like who she is and who he is after they're dead, after all the results are. But yeah. Phineas is defending Yahweh, right? He's like, we're Yahweh's bride, right? The church is Jesus' bride. We should be just as jealous of that relationship as God is jealous of our relationship with him. And we should not tolerate people who are trying to break that bond, right? Obviously, we shouldn't kill somebody in our current culture, but this was acceptable at the time, right? This is, Phineas is supposed to defend the tabernacle, the covenant, and that's what he's doing here. The plague stops, 24,000 die before it burned out. And God orders Moses to treat the Midianites as their enemies, and they drive them off. We'll get a more detailed account of this in Deuteronomy, but we'll just leave it there because there's a lot of nuance in the text there. And Phineas is given a covenant of peace with God because his actions averted God's anger and made peace once again between God and his people. So this is like God reiterating his covenant he makes with Abraham, with Isaac and Jacob, right? Just like he made a covenant with Aaron, now he's reiterating it with Phineas. Probably you're going to be the high priest, your descendants are going to be high priests, right? Just like he did with his father, or his grandfather, I should say. But Phineas is loyal to his God, he loves his God, and is thus jealous when he sees Israel cheating on their God. Phineas, in a way, ransomed Israel by killing this young man and his new priestess bride, who were leading Israel into a terrible sin. Yeah.
A couple of times you said that he was marrying Cosby. I didn't get that impression. This is just an affair.
It could be just an affair. What is marriage? Okay, so a lot of times in the ancient world, you would marry your prostitute and then divorce her once you were done. Yeah. This is a very common, this is the Arab, Muslims still practice this concept today. It's called mishra marriage. But yeah, it's how to do prostitution without it being prostitution, technically. And it was a very common practice. And it's disgusting, yeah. So maybe she's not, maybe she is. Either way, it's like she's Israel's new wife, and they're leaving God for a different spouse, right? It's sort of that idea. It's interesting. What are Christians are? We're not supposed to go and murder people because they're trying to lead us away. We're called to love our neighbors, right? So Paul talks about this. He might be actually alluding to Numbers 5, where the jealousy language about God and Israel is first introduced, and here in 25. As he exhorts believers not to use violence, but with rhetoric and tough love, right? I am zealous or jealous for you with a godly jealousy. I promise you to one husband, to Christ, so that I might present you as a pure virgin to him, right? So it's the attitude of Phineas without the violence, right? Rhetoric, tough love. That might be, disfellowship, right? Because he's got a godly jealousy just like Phineas had a godly jealousy for Israel. Phineas inspired the Maccabee revolt. Just as a side note, Phineas inspired the Maccabee revolt. This story, it inspired them to be faithful to God and revolt against the Greeks.
Oh, the Greeks.
Yeah.
Maccabees.
Yeah, the Maccabeans, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Just a little historical side. We got like a minute if anyone has any final comments. We're going to finish off Numbers next week.
Maccabees were 1,000 years later, right?
Yeah, but they were inspired by the story of Phineas and his zealous for God, just like they were zealous. In fact, the Zealots, right, are kind of inspired by Phineas, yes.
We got out of chapter 24, and there was a verse there that I wanted to just mention.
That's a good point. So I wish we had more time to spend on, the Balaam oracles. But we're out of time. I think the live stream's been shut down. My screen's gone away. So my voice is dying, so thank you all.